And now, the news. Arizona is taking a leaf out of Germany's book in deciding the speed limits are for the weak. They're introducing a new bill that will remove speed limits on certain rural roads during the day, while capping it at 80 miles per hour at nighttime. And while the corny acronym works, what it stands for doesn't. The acronym is RAPID, and it stands for Reasonable and Prudent Interstate Driving. Now, I get that they need to make up an acronym, but reasonable and prudent, come on. Firstly, this is targeted at rural areas, so there's your first word done without going all passive-aggressive by calling it reasonable. Anyone with half a brain knows that it's reasonable to be driving at high speed across long stretches of nothing. Next is prudent, which means acting with or showing care and thought for the future. And again, completely obvious. Because by speeding, I'm thinking about the time in the future that I'm not spending on the road instead of spending with my family. So while I think we keep the acronym, we change it to something that makes more sense, like rural acceleration and passing for interstate driving. I know I make jokes here, but I'm actually serious about this one. And if you're wondering why I'm saying passing, it's because thankfully Arizona lawmakers have saved their brains for where it matters, the laws. Because let's be honest here, any idiot can say remove the speed limit and then call it a day. But when you do, you end up with roads like this in the UK. Now for the uninformed, this is a 2-lane road, and not 2 lanes in the same direction. I mean there's oncoming traffic. For context, this is the width of a typical hatchback in the UK compared to one of these roads. And you see the signs here? That means the speed limit is 60 miles per hour along these roads. And while the British always lead with oh, but what it actually means is that's the limit and you're expected to use common sense. What it actually means is Google Maps took me down these roads instead of the main road to my destination because it saw 60 miles per hour and decided that would be a quicker way. But because I have eyes and a brain, I'm not willing to go above 30 on these roads. This all while the locals in their Range Rovers treat it like a racetrack. They fly past in the oncoming lane at 60 miles an hour, missing me and my little hatchback by millimeters while I scream and change the color of my underwear. Oh, and for good measure, there's a Q7 on my ass going, why is this moron driving so slow? Honestly, I've never seen death up close more frequently than when Google decides to spice up my life a little bit more and tries to generate that spice using near-death experiences. Arizona is using their brains with the speed limit laws. They're not turning these into no-holds-barred street fights between minis and Hummers. What they're going to be doing is trialing it along a section of the Interstate 8, a highway with long open stretches where there's so much nothing it grows 6 feet high and starts growing pink flowers. This is what will set the tone for the eventual implementation. The sections that will have no speed limits will be outside of larger urban areas, will have a crash rate lower than the statewide average over the last 5 years, and will have infrastructure that meets or exceeds state standards. The last point means the road is actually in a good condition and has appropriate signage. Also included in the bill is a program that focuses on driver education around passing, which pulls us all the way back to why I said passing should be included in the acronym. To be honest, I'm not really sure how they educate people on this. It's one thing if you're from Arizona and then maybe you'd add it to the driving exam or pass out leaflets at shops. But the clue's in the name, interstate, meaning that other people from other states will come through and they won't necessarily have had the training that you've given out in your state. I don't really know how you'd go about teaching these people. It's unrealistic to have truck stops at the start of each unlimited section where people need to stop and do a driving lesson. And even if you did, if it were advertised as a learning institution, that'd add further issues given that we know what usually happens at school in America. Anyway, it seems that'll be handled by people just using common sense. I have my doubts, but sure. According to the man leading the charge on this bill, Nick Cupper, most drivers can tell the difference between a crowded city freeway and a wide open stretch of rural interstate. He then went on to say the Rapid Act will let us raise speeds where it's safe, keep tough penalties for reckless driving, and update our laws to reflect how people actually use these roads. He's backed this up with evidence from Montana, where they ran a similar program in the 90s and found that even as people started to hoon it down their roads, seatbelt usage and driver behavior were the leading indicators of fatal crashes, not speed, and that crash and fatality rates remain comparable to neighboring states. All I'm going to say is this is civilized behavior. I know the rest of the world is in on every joke about America, and boy do they live up to the jokes. But when they do get it right, they absolutely get it right. If this pilot program turns into law over there, I may just start having to check flight prices to Phoenix. I'll move my family over there, buy the cheapest V8 I can find, and then spend my days flying up and down the I-8. What could possibly go wrong? Renault has broken the 1,000 kilometers on a single charge mark, but more importantly, it's done so while the car ran at highway speeds. It's done this with a Filante Record 2025, a bespoke vehicle built specifically for this purpose. The car ran for 1,007 kilometers at an average speed of 101 kilometers an hour, using an 87 kilowatt-hour battery, which is equivalent to what you'd find in the electric Renault Scenic. Unsurprisingly, weight savings were the order of the day, with the car weighing in at 1 ton and 60% of that weight being the battery pack itself. The car used brake-by-wire and steer-by-wire systems as part of the weight savings, which effectively means that if the car had suffered a massive electronics failure, the driver better have hoped they weren't pointing at a brick wall off in the distance. Renault say they're going to use the lessons learned to help them build future EVs to be more efficient at high speeds, meaning the next Ford Fiesta will likely be great for long-distance driving. While performing my investigative journalism looking for something to keep everyone's ADHD in check, I noticed a lot of articles about recalls. Now for those who don't know what a recall is, we're going to have a little lesson about how cars are made. What happens is designers and engineers get together and create prototypes. These vehicles are then tested until they're effectively perfect. Then, using this blueprint, a first batch of the model is made. These models are then paired and left in a dark barn with a few lit candles, some smooth jazz, and no contraceptives. Night after night the farm blares with the melody of revs and hooting. And then a few months later the offspring leave to go to their new homes. The problem is that the wranglers on the car sex ranch sometimes get their stock mixed up, and they end up pairing siblings. These siblings don't know any better. All they know is a good old suck, squeeze, bang, blow, and that they're going to lay some rubber down tonight. So the offspring get out into the wild, and the fault eventually gets recognized, either because the new owners are asking why the eyes are looking in opposite directions, or the manufacturer realizes their mistake. However it happens, the manufacturer then alerts various authorities and puts out a wanted notice to let the public know that some vehicles escaped the eugenics farm. Owners of these mentally or physically feeble cars can then bring them in to be seen to by top men.
We have top men working on it right now. Who? Top men.
Once the eyes are pointing in the right direction again, the cars are released back to their owners. Anyway, nature documentary over, the point is I noticed a lot of recall articles appearing lately. You see these every so often, and being a highly respected motoring journalist such as myself, I felt it my duty to cover what types of defective inbreds have escaped the breeding pen. So from the start of the year I'm going to be introducing a new category called It Just Slipped Out. This will be a roundup of recalls from the past week, because it's become so common these days that we can actually turn it into a weekly segment. So we're at the time of year where we reflect on the past 12 months, where we look back and think about whether we're proud of the decisions we've made, or otherwise if we've learned from them. For this next story, I get the feeling that every single person involved doesn't do this. I get the feeling they're the type of person to fart in the car just before their partner gets in. This is the story of some of the strangest custom license plate requests that have been denied in 2025. These are all going to come from the States, although I have no doubt these people exist everywhere. Let's dive in. Now I googled this because I didn't know what it meant, and my first thought was, why would the Americans ban a vanity plate supporting the Big Bash League, an Australian cricket tournament? Then I scrolled a bit further and realized it stands for Brazilian butt lift, which is apparently something women do that removes fat from other parts of their bodies and transfers it into their butts. It's basically smuggling, but instead of moving contraband across the Mexican border, women are taking fat that legally resides in their stomachs and moving it to their butts. They're sheltering enemies of the state under the table.
You're sheltering enemies of the state, are you not?
Yes.
This one, I guarantee you, was going to end up on a pickup truck so high off the ground that the driver needs a stepladder to get into it. The kind that rolls coal and has a sticker that says, I identify as a Prius, because the driver is the mental age of a child with SIDS. Okay, while I hate vanity plates, this one did make me giggle. It stands for Shut Your Bitch Ass Up. And I imagine this was requested by a 90-year-old grandma with a heart of gold, 13 grandchildren, and a Honda Jazz. Alternatively, it was a 90-year-old grandmother who smokes, drinks, drives a Corvette, and isn't allowed within 13 miles of her grandchildren. This one's pretty obvious too, stands for Badass Mom. Now I have a bone to pick with this, because I feel the only time this is acceptable is if you're actually a badass mom. And I don't mean a lady with a BMW X5 that her investment banker husband bought for her because she needs space for the kids and who spends her days getting brunch with the girls. I'm talking about a woman called Amy Oliver, or Smoothie Watt on Instagram. This is a mother who spends her off time sending it in her various supercars while her 3-year-old giggles in the passenger seat. That is what a badass mom looks like. Everyone else is just telling themselves they're one. Like how I tell myself that one day all the screaming into the mirror will eventually turn me into a Super Saiyan. And when that happens, I guarantee my number plate will read SSJ. But until that day, and until you do something worth other people calling you badass, maybe just stick to a vanity plate that reads, I need sleep. Okay, I'm going to need to rapid fire some of these because I've found over 1,000 and that's just from 2 US states, and we're going to be here all day if I don't. All I'm going to say is that the person who wanted this one knows that they're a walking red flag. And if you know them, there's only one thing to do.
Run.
Really? Really? That meme happened in 2024, and you're telling me someone has so little personality that they hung onto it all the way into 2025 and then tried to put it on a license plate. This is the kind of person that would decide they like springs and then design their house around it. Except this person designed their life around an internet meme that lasted 3 weeks and had no lasting impact on the world. So I guess in a way that's appropriate. I mean, you're not wrong. Hey, I really like steak, but I guess if you're vegan, then a plate like this could make sense. And for the last one, I don't really understand what's going on here, because if you drive an EV and it suddenly stops working, doesn't that technically mean that it is bricked? Maybe there's another meaning for it, but to be honest, I just don't care anymore. Leave a comment if you want to educate me, or if you yourself have somehow been bricked while watching this video. And that is the end of the news for 2025.